So the first race of the 2023 Formula 1 World Championship is over, and there is a lot to unpick. We had an utterly dominant Red Bull, a typical Ferrari in shambles, an exciting Aston Martin, and finally, an extremely average Mercedes. While the results on track of 5th and 7th were pretty much what they were expecting based on testing, it's clear to see this weekend was a very hard pill to swallow for Mercedes. Where they are now as the 4th quickest team is far from where they want, should or deserve to be. So what exactly has gone wrong at Mercedes? And can they bounce back and save this year from complete Red Bull dominance? I would even go as far as to say the feeling at the team is even more sour and downbeat following the first race of this year compared to last year, as this was the one where they were poised to bounce back and be back in the fight. Basically, for those that aren't clued in, 2022 was the worst season for Mercedes in over a decade. The new regulations came along and Mercedes simply built the wrong car and suffered terrible bouncing, otherwise known as porpoising. This meant they lost considerable pace over the other teams throughout the season, but Mercedes were confident that once they got rid of the bouncing that they would then have a competitive car. And to be fair, at the 2022 Brazilian Grand Prix they realised this by storming to victory with some incredible pace. Therefore, coming into 2023 they were very positive that they could fight again for wins and the championship now that they had fixed their porpoising issues. But come pre-season testing, the bouncing was certainly gone, but they still had awful pace. This raised serious alarms at the team because it showed they had much deeper issues than just the porpoising. What was it exactly? Well, Lewis was complaining quite a lot about balance limitations, saying the car felt similar in the corners to last year. This only meant more pressure got put on the team and then no sidepod design, which was different to every other team on the grid. But as always, you never know where you stand until the first race. And well, come qualifying, it seemed all of Mercedes' worries didn't materialise. By the end of Q1, Russell put the Mercedes up into 2nd, and for Q2, Mercedes stood 3rd and 4th. But it was clear that Red Bull still had a lot to give, and so come Q3, Red Bull turned up the dials and blew everyone away, qualifying 1st and 2nd. Mercedes, they only managed 6th and 7th. And well, come the actual race on Sunday, it was the same case if not worse. Initially they had a good start with Lewis taking 5th from Alonso and Russell moving up to 6th. Then Russell had some pretty good pace and began to pressure Hamilton, but soon Alonso was on their tail and so they pitted Hamilton, resulting in Alonso getting past Russell. He was then pitted soon after. But it was pretty clear that once both Mercedes and Alonso had their final stops, that Aston Martin simply had much better race pace. And so Russell was struggling to get past Stroll for the whole race and came home to finish 7th. But it was actually a little more promising for Hamilton, with him and Alonso engaging in a brilliant fight for what was then 5th place. But the Aston's incredible race pace prevailed and Alonso got past Hamilton with an incredible move into the difficult turn 10. However, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc faced an engine failure on lap 42, giving Hamilton 5th, quickly chasing down the remaining Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Sadly though, he couldn't keep his tyres in a good window, and so Mercedes came home to finish 5th and 7th. I think it's fair to say that they were incredibly average throughout the whole weekend, with Toto Wolff labelling it as one of the worst days of racing the team has ever had. Now, while the actual performance wasn't dreadful, what made this weekend so painful for Mercedes was the fact reality had truly hit them. They were no longer able to blame the lack of pace on porpoising from last season. What became clear from this weekend was that Mercedes' problems are fundamental, and much deeper than they thought. Right, so that's where Mercedes find themselves at the moment. They stand pretty convincingly 4th in the constructors in terms of pace, behind Red Bull, Ferrari and Aston Martin. Lewis said himself that they definitely can't fight the Ferraris, as well as the Astons being much quicker. But to be fair, when asked whether they could fight for wins this season, Toto said absolutely we can. But that's all well and good, but what do they need to do to get to that point? Well, to begin with, we've known for a while now that Mercedes plan to bring new upgrades to the 6th round of the season in Imola for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Now, we can assume these will be changes to their side pods, moving more in a direction towards Red Bull and Ferrari. And well, until now, we've been led to believe that these upgrades will bring them back to the front. Following the extent of how far ahead Red Bull are, Toto has now said that Mercedes will need to make radical changes to their 2023 car if they want to catch Red Bull. whose gap to Mercedes has allegedly doubled if not tripled. Now, the Imola upgrades are believed to shave off 0.3 seconds off their lap time, which is quite a lot, but clearly not enough to challenge the mighty Red Bulls. One aspect that can give Mercedes some hope is the fact that Aston Martin uses a Mercedes engine, gearbox, hydraulics and rear suspension. So it's clear that internally there is a lot of promise. Mercedes simply needs to aerodynamically optimise the car. So based on this, it does seem Mercedes are already working on a third concept beyond their second concept, which is to be released at Imola. All in all, it's not smooth sailing back in Brackley. So the all-important question is, can Mercedes challenge Red Bull to the Constructors' title? Will these developments come quick enough to salvage back a championship fight? Well, to be frank, I would say no. The issues on the car are simply too fundamental and will require serious time back at the factory to develop and be track ready. However, I would say though that after Imola, the upgrade should put them level more or less with Aston Martin and Ferrari, hopefully challenging for podiums. But to then bridge the gap to Red Bull would require a much greater step up in performance. So all in all, I don't think Mercedes will bring the upgrades soon enough to challenge Red Bull for the World Championship. But that doesn't mean they couldn't get a win or two as the season progresses, bringing new upgrades and most likely Aston Martin dropping off somewhere. So the Bahrain Grand Prix was a serious wake-up call for Mercedes. They are no longer able to fall back on the excuse of porpoising for their poor performance like they did all of last season. They have now been shown the facts, and their car design philosophy simply doesn't work. Question is, can they do the work to salvage the season and bring back some success to the team we all know can win big?